A new study in Science has published that shark finning regulations did not decrease shark mortality over a 10-year period. And we're going to find out why that happened, or why that didn't happen, on this episode of Ocean Talk. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ocean Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is where I talk all things ocean so that you can figure out what's happening with the ocean and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And unfortunately today we are going to be talking about the brutal act of shark finning and how shark finning regulations and bans did not necessarily help out shark mortality. And that is devastating, to be honest. And I'm going to talk a lot about the conservation and why that didn't happen. Before I do, I want to go back into what shark finning is, how it got into the public eye, and then how all these bans came to be and why it didn't work. So first of all, shark finning is the heinous act of fishers going out into the ocean, catching sharks, cutting off their fins only while they're still alive and dumping them back into the ocean while still alive for them to just die. They can't swim. They bleed to death. It's essentially, it's awful. It's a very brutal death. It's a very heinous act. And people just, over time, we estimate at the beginning that there was 100 million sharks per year that were being killed for their fins. And then more studies were done that showed that it was about 60 to 70 million. But still, 60 to 70 million is a lot of sharks. You can't have that many sharks die without affecting the ocean, without affecting the food web. These apex predators are very important to our food web, to our oceans, to keeping them the way they are, which is the way we like them. So shark finning wasn't really made aware to the greater public until a couple of documentaries called Shark Water. Now these documentaries really expose the shark finning industry to the public, and from that resulted a number of organizations that were already existing to change their programming to banning shark finning. There were a lot of organizations that were started, big, small, just many people, one person. They started their organizations for the sole purpose of banning shark finning. But the whole point of all these organizations were they wanted to ban shark finning. That was the whole purpose. If we ban shark finning, we prevent millions of sharks from dying per year. That was the goal. And that happened over a period from 2012 to 2019 when this study in Science that was published in Science looked at the data. They looked at increased regulations on banning shark finning, which was great. That was needed. And they looked at whether shark mortality decreased over that time. A couple of things happened. Some countries just banned shark finning. Countries like Brazil, Taiwan, Venezuela, and some countries like Fiji decided to ban shark fishing altogether, right? You can't even fish for sharks. It's illegal. Don't even bother trying. Other countries put in bans on fishing for particular species in state waters or national waters. Canada, I know that where I live, we had a ban on shark finning where you had to bring the whole shark back to the shore and not just the fins. So we had to see the fins on the shark before you could actually take the fins and sell them. The states, they had multiple different styles of banning. Like it got increased and increased until recently where they said you can't sell fins at all, even if you bring the whole shark back. So, people were looking at different ways, different models of banning the sale of shark fins or even shark finning in general. The Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission banned the fishing and selling of oceanic white-tip sharks, and then CITES listed the oceanic white-tip shark on their CITES list, which means you can't trade or sell or bring into certain countries oceanic white-tip sharks, as well as 3 different hammerhead species. And in 2016, 3 species of thresher sharks were added to the list. Now, over the time of the study, so from 2012 to 2019, researchers revealed that shark mortality decreased in pelagic waters by 7%, but in coastal waters, it actually increased by 4%. Now, this is where we have to get into why the regulations didn't work. Shark finning was put in place in a lot of countries. I just mentioned them. We thought that this was going to decrease shark mortality. You ban the finning, sharks don't die, and that's how we figure it out. The idea of the shark finning ban was to ensure that the sharks come back to the shore with the fins on. So the idea is you couldn't go out to sea, grab sharks, cut their fins off, send them back in the water alive, and then bring them back. You had to have the shark with those fins. So the idea there is a shark will fill up a boat a lot faster than just its fins. So a lot of countries like Canada, like Brazil, like Taiwan, like Venezuela, put in those shark fin bans and they had the whole shark come back to the shore. Problem with that regulation is that other markets developed for sharks. So instead of just selling the fins, you could sell the shark meat. You can sell the cartilage, which, to be honest, when you look at fishing altogether, as much as some people like fishing and some people don't, you want to use up the entire animal. But the problem was there was no decrease in demand of sharks based on just the banning of shark fin. It was, we actually found more we can use from the sharks, so let's just kill the same amount of sharks. And over that study period, they found that 76 to 80 million more sharks were killed per year. So it didn't decrease shark mortality, just the regulations on shark finning. If you manage shark fisheries properly, or you ban shark fishing in general, you can definitely ensure that shark mortality would decrease. But that wasn't the case. There was no significant decrease. In fact, the demand for sharks was still there. Where do we go now? The big thing is we need to look at what management tools do we have now. We have CITES, we have the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission that actually helped in the pelagic world to decrease the sales and fishing of sharks, right? So that helped. But now in the coastal area, we saw an increase of 4% of shark fishing or shark mortality. So now what we have to do is we have to look at the coastal fisheries and say, what can we do to decrease the fisheries there? There's been a recent listing of a number of coastal shark fish species on CITES, so that should help decrease the amount. Now it's just a matter of enforcing those within these coastal waters, which is always by countries, because coastal waters are usually within the bounds of the exclusive economic zone, which is the boundaries and regulation area of specific nationalities, right? Every nation has an exclusive economic zone where they can regulate fisheries, they have control over those waters and what happens to those waters. The good news is 95% of the sharks that were caught were within national boundaries. This means that we can put pressure on the countries where we have these types of catches of sharks to put in place these bans on shark fishing or highly regulate shark finning. Can we have a sustainable shark fishing, world? Potentially. I don't know. I doubt it at this point, but I think a ban of shark fishing altogether would really help move the needle significantly on decreasing shark mortality. But in reality, is that going to happen? I don't think it will. Too many people depend on money from shark fishing. Too many people depend on money from the fins of these sharks. And if you put in all-out bans, you're really going to have to up your enforcement game, which is really difficult on the ocean. And you're going to really have to police the waters, because there's so many reasons from a greed standpoint and from a survival standpoint for fishers to fish sharks, and because it brings them in money. There's still a demand for sharks around the world. So until that demand goes away, which I don't know if it ever will, there will always be pressure on fishing for sharks. So whether you regulate it or you ban it altogether, you're going to have to enforce it. And that's where organizations are really going to have to focus. This story highlights a problem with just focusing on one thing, on one conservation measure. When all these organizations came into place and they were all talking about ban shark finning, that will do. It's not that simple. And I have to admit, there were a number of researchers and policymakers who were saying, hey, we need to do more. We need to really put pressure on shark fisheries management because people are still fishing for sharks. So the good news is that a lot of the shark fishing, 95% of it, happens within national waters. So we can put pressure on governments to regulate that. Not an easy way to do it. It's very complex. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of things that are in play. A lot of users want sharks. There's a lot of pressure on governments to not enforce this shark protection, but we need to enforce shark protection if we want to conserve the waters. So the best thing for you to do is to team up with an organization that is looking at doing some great things on shark fisheries management, or you can talk, both. You can talk to your local representative, government representative, Senate, like your senators, your Congress or MPs, whatever you have in your government. If you have a democratic society, you should be able to speak to your elected official and talk to them about how important it is for them to really work for you to ban shark fishing in general or manage it. Make sure that they know it's important. Check out organizations that are all in on helping shark survive and shark mortality and decreasing shark mortality. And this is a big thing. So this is contact your representatives and team up with organizations who are working with governments to ensure that the bans go into place, or shark fishing bans or shark regulations go into place. That's what's most important. That's it for today's episode. I would love to hear what you think. Do you think other things should be done to make sure we protect these sharks? Love to hear your answers in the comments below. And that's it for today's episode. If you want to hear more about sharks, you can subscribe and hit the notification bell to hear all these new episodes that I'm putting out and making sure that you're up to date on what's happening in the ocean. And if you love podcasting and not just video podcasting, you can subscribe to my How to Protect the Ocean podcast, which is on Apple, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast hosts or podcast apps that you love to listen to. Just there's a link in the description below to get to those if you want to get access to those, and go to the website and you can download whatever you want. But that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ocean Talk. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Angelo, and have a great day and happy conservation.